A wider freedom is coming to the women of America. Too long has it been held that women has no right to enter these movements. Politics is the place for women. It is commonly known that women in America, particularly white women, were given the right to vote in 1920. Although this is a well-known fact, we do not often dwell on the reason for the struggle that women had to face in order to get this right. Three of the main arguments against women's suffrage were that women had different, inferior roles in society in comparison to men, the physical and mental nature of women was not conducive for leadership or full participation in society, and because women already had limited suffrage before the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Prior to the 1920s, and for a considerable amount of time after, the female role in society was drastically separate from that of the male role. The place for women up to very early 20th century did not often extend beyond the duties of the home. The women were the child bearers, the child rearers, and they took care of the house, as well as everyone in it. Men were put to work outside the home, and they could be found in every other part of society, whether it be in politics and government, working a job outside the home, or laboring in any other form of the word. A man was likely in this position. So, with that said, there were clear distinctions between the role of men and women, and the female role was one that was not seen, as they were essentially hidden within the home. That being said, the concept of women gaining the right to vote implied that women would take on a responsibility that extended beyond the home, so naturally this was fought against. However, large-scale events such as world wars would bring a greater amount of women into the spotlight as they took on roles outside the home. Hysteria is a natural phenomenon, the common denominator of the female nature. It's the female weapon, and the test of a man is his ability to cope with it. It was believed that the physical and mental nature of women was not conducive for leadership or even for full participation in society. This concept builds upon the last because it was believed that women not only belonged in the home, but that they were not built for anything more, not even the right to vote. Take for consideration the idea of hysteria, which was a term meant to explain the cause of uncertain, unwelcomed behaviors, and it was commonly used for women. Hysteria would be used to describe a large variety of both mental and physical conditions, and it was a concept not founded in scientific or medical reasoning. The argument surrounding hysteria would often deduce that women were far too emotional beings for participating in something like government. Thus, it was merely another attempt at portraying women as being incapable of holding leadership positions or taking part in society through voting. Another central argument against women's suffrage stemmed from the fact that many women in America had limited suffrage prior to the 19th Amendment. Prior to 1920, many women in states such as Illinois were able to vote on the municipal level. It was not often understood that women were participating in government prior to 1920. However, the national struggle for women's suffrage took women's rights to another level. Women were fighting for the equality that they had been striving toward despite their ability to vote on the local and state levels. However, the argument against women's suffrage clung to the idea that most women were already given the opportunity to vote on a municipal level, so they did not need anything more. There shall never be another season of silence until women have the same rights men have on this green earth. I thought I had been a suffragist before I became a poor law guardian, but now I began to think about the vote in women's hands not only as a right, but as a desperate necessity. The main contributors to the argument against women's suffrage concluded that society was doing just fine with men as the main participants, and thus it was implied that women's interests and needs were taken care of in the hands of men. The 1920s was a major turning point for women because they were able to show that they were deserving of freedoms and that they had needs beyond the understanding and empathy of men. The right to vote implied change because it wasn't just the right to vote that society was afraid of. In congruence with the main arguments about women's suffrage mentioned before, women gaining the right to vote was one piece of a larger puzzle. After the 19th Amendment was approved by the Senate in 1919, it was ratified in August of 1920. Following this, we can chart drastic changes in the roles of women in American society. If it weren't for very strong women who stood up against the conventionality of American society in organizations such as the National Women's Suffrage Association, women's suffrage might have taken a lot longer. but they defied the odds.